chill. There we go. Okay. You hit the pause button, you keep on hoping that it's going to stop playing the music, and then eventually. All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Mike Dane with MLS Technology. This class today is going to be the transactions class. We're going to be going over the transaction desk system you guys have access to. Before we get started with the actual course content, though, I did actually want to run through just a couple basic things about the webinars and how we run things. First and foremost, I wanted to mention that we have everybody on mute by default. So what this means is that you guys will have to actually hit that raise hand button to get unmuted. Or if you guys want, you can always just hit the Q&A button to ask any questions. The chat option for any commentary you want to add, examples, any stories you want to share, etc. I also wanted to point out that we will have the session recorded. I'll have the recording of this class sent off after class is over. So if you guys are interested in kind of following along or doing this not in real time, you guys can pause and do everything else you might want to do. All right, then we also wanted to let you guys know that if you have any audio or video issues during the course, just any at all, please, please, please make sure that you let us know in advance. If we find that there's a lot of people that are having issues, we can always consider that when we're getting to the CE credit portion. But so far, we've been having very minimal issues with the Zoom stuff, so hopefully there's just a quick solution that we can provide. If you do find that you're having any trouble either staying connected or anything like that, just give us a call over at the service desk and we can help you out. Also, the CE credit for the class will be sent off immediately after class is over pretty much. So by the end of the day, it should be in the hands of OREC. That doesn't always necessarily mean that they're going to have the information processed that quickly. It's just that, you know, I'll get it over to them as quickly as possible, and then you should see it before the end of the month. All right. So for the buttons down there at the bottom, again, we've got the chat for any commentary, Q&A for any questions, and then the raise hand button if you guys would like to get unmuted to ask a question. And if you're joining us on a mobile device, it's going to be just a little bit different. There's going to be the same buttons down at the bottom. You're just going to have to tap the screen in order for those to appear. But just as a reminder, and raise hand to get unmuted if need be, especially important if you guys are on a mobile device, since typing out questions on those tiny screens can be a little bit cumbersome, to say the least. All right. So let's go ahead and launch the poll. Actually, it looks like everybody that wants to be here is here. So I got a poll that's been sent out. Go ahead and answer that. Just as a heads up, this is going to be used as justification for the CE credit. So I do need to see that everybody's actually responded to this. Excuse me, I phrased that poorly. In order for you to receive credit, you will need to respond to this. Not if somebody doesn't, no one gets CE credit. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Anyway. All right, that's everybody. Go ahead and end the poll, share the results. So from the looks of it, let's see what we got. Oh, there we go. It looks like the majority of you are new to real estate, or actually it's just a half and half split, isn't it? So half of you guys are veterans, half of you guys are either new or at least relatively new. I keep on moving my goalpost for what's considered new. I have been here for 5 days shy of 4 years and a month. But it still feels like there's always new stuff happening, new systems to have to learn, new features to have to learn, et cetera, et cetera. I can't even imagine what it's like to have to deal with the sales side, the marketing side, all of the other stuff related. So as far as me, I would say that I'm still relatively new. What form document signing platform are you guys currently using? So it looks like a couple of you guys are already using Transaction Desk. We've got one person on ZipForm, one person on SkySlope, and then we've got a couple on Dotloop or DocuSign. There is going to be a couple things that I'm going to mention during class for those of you guys who are using Dotloop currently. Just some things that we happen to have noticed. Since Dotloop is the most popular of the alternative software, I'm going to just point those out just to make sure that everybody's aware. Not that this is bad. Again, we don't want anybody to feel like we're trying to compete with other software that you guys have available to you. It's just this happens to be what comes with your service through the MLS. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with the course content. It is 9:06. Here we go. All right, so again, just as a little repeat, my name is Mike Dane. I'm the training director at MLS Technology. The class we're going to be going over today is a 2-hour-long class. We will be taking a break towards the top of the hour. So if you guys end up wanting to make a phone call, run to the bathroom, anything like that, not to worry, we're just a little bit away. We're going to start off with actually how to get into Transaction Desk. When you first get into the MLS Technology portal, so it's just simply mlstechnology.com. I know there's a lot of people that have been going to tulsarealtors.com and then hitting that realtor login. But if you guys just want to go straight to the login page, mlstechnology.com will bring you to the right spot. On that mlstechnology.com portal, or just what we usually call the MLS portal, is going to be a link here directly to Transaction Desk. If you guys have found yourself in a different system already, for instance, if you guys are in Matrix, there's also going to be a section on your homepage called External Links. Now, just as a reminder, the widgets that you guys have on the Matrix homepage can be moved around. So this might not always necessarily be somewhere obvious, or you may have actually closed it and it's under that external links where you're going to have to pull it back out. And then you guys can find a whole bunch of extra links, including a link to Transaction Desk. Now, either way that you guys go, whether you're accessing it through the MLS portal, or if you guys are going through the link in Matrix, it should bring you to a page that looks like this. Now, the agent dashboard is going to be the main page for pretty much everybody in the system. Oh, Sherry, I'm sorry that well, bear with me for just a second here. Someone's having some technical difficulties. And actually, if you guys wouldn't mind, hit that raise hand button if you can hear my voice. Just want to make sure that everybody can hear me. And I'll just keep talking. Sherry, let me know if you can hear me. Just hit that raise hand button. And again, if you can hear me, hit that raise hand button. I just want to make sure that everybody's able. Sherry had reported that she was having some issues. I'll just keep talking. Good morning. It was a lovely morning this morning. Wasn't quite as hot as usual. Didn't feel like I was walking out into an air dryer or a hair dryer. That was nice. Well, and I apologize. Give me just another second here. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and continue on. Just a second. think I was showing some new hires and information. Forgot to set this back to default. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, so when you first land into Transaction Desk, there's going to be a screen here called the Agent Dashboard. So this is going to be the main page that you land on, no matter how you guys are initially getting into Transaction Desk. If you happen to notice that your particular setup is saying Broker Dashboard instead, we're going to be focusing in today on just the agent side of things. So there's going to be a link that's going to be over here towards where the little question mark TV is. It's going to just show two people standing side by side. Actually, coincidentally, it looks like this icon right here. Just switch that over so that you guys are seeing the agent dashboard. Everything we're going to be doing today is going to be from that perspective, just to ensure that we're showing what everyone will have access to. All right. Now, this agent dashboard is going to have a little bit of customization that you guys can put into it. So I would always recommend that you leave the create transaction and probably the create signing, start signing option on the main page. But the rest of these items, the widgets, as we would normally call them, are actually going to be things that you can move around, resize, etc. Kind of just did that a little bit now just to get everything set back to the default, but let's run through exactly how that works. So up at the top right corner, there's going to be a padlock. It opens up a little section underneath here, just a tray that we can see that has a whole bunch of different icons on it. This is going to work similar to the way that Matrix does with the additional widget, where you guys can just pull and place things from that widget so that it can show up on your screen. But with the Matrix system, nothing is locked down. So if I end up opening this up on my iPad, for instance, and I scrolled to the bottom of the page, I might accidentally rearrange something because it's just assuming I'm dragging. With Transaction Desk, they have this padlock and a tray of all of the additional widgets available here. You'll also notice that when you unlock, it's going to add a little bit of texture to the top of each of these widget bars. This is indicating to us that we can actually move things around. We can click and drag them to replace them wherever we want them to go. Notice it gives that little blue border where it's going to be dropping things. We also have the option to rearrange, resize the things. So if I wanted to just change this to be a little bit narrower, if I wanted to maybe get rid of these other options and place the Authentisign one down here instead. So you can kind of set this up to where you want things to be. Just as a heads up, I typically don't necessarily add too much to my screen. For instance, if I was going to be doing this on a consistent basis, I'd probably want to have my signatures and then also my transactions showing up. Again, the create transaction and start signing are both important ones, but if you guys wanted to create templates, you can add that on there. If you guys wanted to add contacts to the system, you can add that, upload documents. There's a bunch of different options. But again, the main things that I recommend that everybody has on their homepage is the create transaction, start signing, the transactions themselves, and the signings themselves. Once you guys have set this up to your heart's content, just go ahead and click this little lock again. It's going to remove the tray and it's going to take away the texture from the tops of the widgets. So we know that we don't have to worry about accidentally moving anything around now. All right. Now, everything that we're going to be focused on today, again, is going to be from the agent dashboard perspective. We're also going to focus into a very specific example. I'm going to be doing this from the perspective of creating a listing. We're going to talk about how to get the forms added, how to get the documents signed, and also how to fill out the property data form so that we can actually have the listing data already ready to go by the time we actually want to put that into Matrix. So since we're going to be starting from absolute scratch, where we don't even have a listing agreement in place, we don't have any of the details about the property itself, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to hit this create transaction button over here on the top left. And this is going to ask for only one piece of required information. Notice a little red asterisk indicating that all we need to do is actually add a name to this. Now, in my case, I'm going to be naming this something specific. This is a recommendation that I got. You guys do not have to follow this as gospel. This is just a strong recommendation that I was given by somebody who apparently uses Transaction Desk all the time. But the naming convention that they recommend is to put in the last name of the person that you're interacting with, buyer, seller, whatever. So in this case, I'll put in Washington, and then the address of the property that you're going to be working with. Now, apparently the logic behind this was that South George Street. There we go. Logic behind this was just that buyer, seller, whatever, this is potentially going to change. But if you're working with the Washingtons, you also don't want to have a list or a transaction, excuse me, that's just named after them. This is actually a stumbling block that I've noticed a lot of people run into, is that they name their transaction after someone and then they end up interacting with them again. Lo and behold, they have a same transaction name somewhere else and it gets confusing. Adding the address to it helps kind of clarify that. If we just do the address though, then you may end up forgetting who it was that you were working with, or maybe you're working with a buyer on one side, the seller on the other side, etc. So this is just kind of an easy template to start off with, but again, this is not something that's required to be in a certain fashion, so you can name it whatever is going to be the most helpful to you. Make sure that you're prioritizing what's going to make sense to you over any other conventions that people are trying to offer. If it helps you, go for it. This is a recommendation from someone who has ADD. So sometimes things that other people find help them so much do not help me at all. And other things that are cluttered and don't seem to make sense to people, I'll be like, well, I know exactly where that thing is. I can tell you exactly where it's positioned, even what orientation it's in a drawer that's buried somewhere else. It's just make sure that this makes sense to you first and foremost. Now, the next thing that we want to talk about is this template option. Templates are actually something we're going to be discussing a little bit later in class. I want to make sure that you guys understand why these are important. But if you notice when you guys start to do this create transaction option that you do not even have a section here for template, do not worry. That's actually just indicating that you don't have any templates that you've created for yourself, and also that your office has not created any templates for you either. This is not a bad thing. This just means that there hasn't been one created. So if you guys don't see that, don't worry. We're going to be talking about how to make those later. Also, there's a type section. In this case, I'm actually going to be using this one to do the residential listing, but I wanted to point something out down here at the bottom. Add me as the, at the moment, is set to neither. I don't have any details clarified right now besides the name, so it doesn't know what exactly the purpose is of this particular transaction. As soon as I define a type, that's when it's actually going to automatically add me as the listing agent. The assumption being that whatever the situation is, I've now clarified that I'm going to be putting in a residential listing, so it's going to automatically assume that I am the listing agent. There's also an import data section that allows us to import either from an MLS number or from Realist. Now, the MLS number one is going to be really simple. Grab that 7-digit number, toss it in there, easy peasy. If you guys are going to be importing from Realist, there's going to be a couple extra steps. First, you're going to have to choose which county you're going to be searching within, and then provide the tax parcel number, or the tax ID, the APN. Some counties refer to it as the account number. But if you guys are not sure what that is off the top of your head, not to worry. There is actually a tax search option. It's going to be a completely different pop-up. So we would have to type in our county information, put in whatever the address is that we're going to be working with. In this case, just as a heads up, since this is different than how Matrix and Realist look at things, the street name in this case is actually going to be something that includes the suffix, or whatever the case may be, the pre-directional, post-directional, etc. I usually recommend to people just to put in the street number, so the house number, and just the street's name. It's typically going to be able to find that information pretty easily. You select the select box there and hit select, easy peasy. Now, in our case, we're actually not going to be importing. I want to show you guys what it looks like to do all of this information from a completely blank slate. But beyond that, again, we have this add me as the. You guys can always switch this over. So for instance, if I'm going to be listing it, but I've already got a buyer lined up, cool. I can go both selling agent, or if you guys are admins, you can use that neither option as well. Finally, there's this use wizard function down here at the very bottom. It's just a checkbox, yes or no. Just as a heads up though, the use wizard function is actually very, very useful. I know there's some people that have been using Matrix, or not Matrix, excuse me, Transaction Desk from the day that we initially made it available to members, and they still use this wizard function even after, I think it's what, like 10 years or so of having Transaction Desk available to you guys. Anyway, I would strongly suggest keeping that with you. Just use wizard, and then we're going to go ahead and hit create. So this is one of the things that I really like about Transaction Desk, is a lot of times the interface is just very simple. So I don't even have to worry about too much extra. There's not a whole bunch of options that I'm going to have to deal with quite yet. I can just hit create, and that starts the process. Now, since I was hitting that use wizard option, and that's the default for now, it's going to bring me directly into the wizard on step 1. Now there's 5 steps that we're going to be going through, and it starts us off with our details section. This is where it's going to be going through the basic information about the property. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my street number, grab my street name, put in my city. Let's pretend it's Eufaula today. Macintosh. Right? Is that the right county for Eufaula? Anyway, whatever it is. There we go. So I got some basic information about the address filled out over here. We can put in subdivision, lot, page, plat, whatever. If you guys need to, it's available. Over on the right-hand side, I'm going to choose my property type as residential, put in a year built, and I'm just actually going to leave the rest of this kind of blank except for my legal description. Grab my legal description. There we go. Good enough for government work. I think we should be set. All right. Down towards the bottom, I'm also going to be putting in my list price. 123, 123, 123. Perfect. $1 billion house. Going to retire off my commission. Excellent. So I've got some basic information in here. Now, you guys don't have to be too thorough if you're following along in real time, or if you guys are following along in the recording. This is just going to be to get some information to fill in, and that's it. You guys don't have to worry about this too much. We can always get rid of this transaction later if we need to. There's a big menu button up at the top that allows us to delete this if it does turn out that I've made something that doesn't need to exist anymore. Now, I did want to point out something that's actually going to be a little different than how we use things in Matrix. It's going to be this transaction status option. Currently, it's actually offering the open status to me. If I click on this dropdown, either in the transaction status section or up here in this bar that's going to follow us everywhere in Transaction Desk, we can actually see active, closed, closed file complete, expired, open, withdrawn, pending. This open status is the only one on here besides this kind of file complete option that's actually separate from what we would normally be able to see when we're getting into Matrix. So this open is kind of intended to be the limbo state before a property has become active. So before it has an MLS number, it's going to be hanging out in this open status. Once we've gotten everything done and everything is connected, we're going to come in here, switch this over to active, pending, closed, and then of course, finally, once the listing is completely done, no paperwork required anymore, it just needs to be archived, closed file complete. So in our case, for now at least, I'm just going to leave it as open. And I've got the rest of my details that I needed filled out on this details page. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. This brings us to step 2, which is the transaction dates. I'm going to keep mine exceedingly simple. Here today, gone tomorrow. Easy peasy. So I'm going to hit next. So here's our contacts page. This is going to be step 3 of 5. Now, remember at the very beginning of this process, when we were initially starting that transaction, I gave it a name. I chose that I was a residential listing, and then it automatically added me as the listing agent. So here I am. This is the account that I happen to be signed into is called Training Agent. And then it's also going to be showing me my office information up here at the top. Now, this is important for us to make sure that we have available to us. There's also going to be a button to add yourself. And In our case, though, I actually need to go up here and add in my two sellers. So I've got George and Martha Washington. I'm going to go ahead and hit add. And it gives me a short list of options. If you guys have already created a contact within Transaction Desk, you guys can grab them again. But primarily, you guys are going to find yourselves using this create new transaction contact. When you choose this, make sure you choose your seller. George Washington, and I'll put in an email address for him. Now, it's important to note that on this page, there's only 3 pieces of information that are actually required. The type, which you guys see is a pretty long list of a whole bunch of different kinds of people. I'm going to be using the seller for this one. We got our first name and our last name. It does not require us to put in an email address from step 1, though. Now, part of the reason why is because you guys do have the option to just get everything filled out, get everything set up and printed, and then have them sign physically in person. All the paperwork is filled out already. It already grabbed the address, it already grabbed the contact information and dumped it all onto the forms and contracts that we needed. But you don't have to send that out to get signed. Now, in our case, we are in fact actually going to send this off to do a digital signing because getting stuff signed in person, easy. You guys shouldn't need too much help with that. It's just one button difference. But with the signing is actually going to be a little bit more complex. So that's what we're going to be covering today. Now, in the case of these 2 clients that I'm going to be working with, they both share an email account. This is one of the notable differences between .loop and Transaction Desk. .loop, at least as far as I remember, and what I've been told, at least fairly recently, is that they do not allow multiple people with the same email address to be participating in the same signing. For those of you guys who are still using .loop, if you guys wouldn't mind in the chat function, just if you could confirm whether or not that that's still the case or if they've made some changes to that. Because otherwise, again, still great piece of software. It's just that, if you end up having a couple that shares an email address, whether it's a older couple that they only have one email between the 2 of them, or I knew some people from ORU that as soon as they got married, they shared email accounts, Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts, everything just merged into one person. But either way, this is not a particularly uncommon thing to have a shared email. Transaction Desk should allow you guys to use those. Now, one other thing that I wanted to point out is up here at the very top, we've got the general section, which is where we see everything right now. And then we've also got the address section. Now, under the general section, it's going to be focused on the individual getting their legal name, which could be where the corporation, trust, company, whatever the case may be, is going to be put. This could also be someplace where if they wanted to go by, let's say they're Robert, they go by Bob, their legal name could show up as Robert, and then their preferred signature could be set as Bob. So there's a variety of different ways to work this out. Legal name could be the company, preferred signature could be their information. But on the address page, you guys will notice that there's a same as property address tab up here at the top. This actually only appears if I have them on a seller. If I put it on buyer, I have to manually fill all this in. If I switch them over to a seller, it's going to automatically give me a field here that I can just check this checkbox, and it'll fill in all of the information from the address page that we saw just a minute ago. Once I've got all of this filled in, I can go ahead and save my contact, and here's George. I could always come back to change his contact information in here if I need to. Just click on his name, and you can go through and actually make sure that all the details are correct. If the email address was misspelled, if the address was incorrect, whatever the case may be. Now, I do need to add his wife. She needs to get her signature on everything, so we'll go through seller, in this case, Martha Washington, and we'll put in the email address. Again, keeping the same exact email address. Again, we do have the legal name where we could put in a corporation, company, trust, whatever, preferred signature, preferred email initials, or preferred initials. In her case, she does actually want to have her middle initial represented. So got that in there, hit save, and I'm good to go. Now you may have noticed that there was a checkbox down there at the bottom. When you guys are adding contacts into the system, there's an add to address book choice down here at the very bottom. Just as a heads up for this, if you guys are going through the training right now, that add to address book will take whatever fake contact and add that into your contacts list for future use. This can actually be useful though if you guys are doing a legitimate transaction contact, because that way, if you do end up having them as a buyer or seller later on down the line, you'll already have their information ready to go. Then the only thing you actually have to change whenever you use them again is what their type is. So, but I've got everything added onto my contacts page. So now we're going to go ahead and hit next. And this is where we're going to start discussing effectively the hierarchy for how the transactions are used. So when you guys are first creating a transaction, we are effectively creating a manila folder with just all the forms and contracts and everything else that we might need to use. The first couple steps that we've gone through so far have actually been focused entirely on information about this particular transaction and who is going to be involved. From here on out, what we're going to be doing is adding the forms and the documents that are going to be related to this transaction. So up at the top right, instead of doing add to create a contact, we're going to click add, and it's going to present me with all of the folders with all of the forms that we normally use. Now inside here is going to be a bunch of stuff that's going to be regionally specific. So for instance, we have the Ada folder, a Bartlesville folder. SOAR has a whole series of folders. The Southern Oklahoma Board of Realtors does as well. And then the same thing goes for Texoma. Now, the forms that are contained within some of those regionally specific folders are just duplicates. In fact, actually right now, as of a month ago or so, we've been tasked with, or I've been tasked with trying to get the folder structure redone. When we went through, there was about 600 different forms throughout the system, 400 of which are actually duplicates that are contained within a different folder as well. So we're going to try and make sure that this is all simplified down in the very near future. If you guys have any requests about that or suggestions or just something that might make life a little bit easier, just let me know in the chat or send us an email or something. Just let us know what might make things a little bit better for this system. Any kind of feedback really, but specifically about the folders for right now. But for me, what I'm going to be doing is actually sticking to the residential contracts and forms. Notice this one does not have any regional specificity. So it's not SOAR, it's not Ada, anything like that. This is going to be just for the generic things. And of course, there's also a big section for the GTAR forms. Now, I wanted to point out that we also have all of the OREC forms as well. So if you guys are just wanting to use the generic statewide offerings, all of those are available through the generic named folders. So again, right now I'm in the residential contracts and forms. If I go back, I can always jump into, let's say I wanted to do the listing details. I can jump in here and, oh, would you see that? And we've got OREC, listing agreement, exclusive right to sell is also contained within this folder under the SOAR listing. So a lot of duplicates. Again, we're going to be tidying that up over the next month or so. Now, what I would suggest to people normally is instead of jumping into any of these specific folders and then having to sort through, in this case, dozens and dozens of different forms, there's a search button up at the top right here where we can actually fill out whatever it is that we're hoping to find. So in my case, I'm looking for the exclusive right to sell. So I'm going to just do exclusive right to sell. Perfect. So I've got a relatively short list now. So rather than having to worry about all the different listing documents that are available, exclusive right to sell narrows me down to a nice short list. And underneath each of the forms that it's offering me to use is going to be what folder that happens to be contained within. So here's our OREC listing agreement, exclusive right to sell. That's the one that I was interested in. I'm going to check the checkbox for that. My basket up here at the top right is showing me that I've only increased my number by 1. So now I have a number 1 up here. But when I scroll up and down this list, I see that the OREC form that's contained in the Ada folder is checked, and the OREC form that's contained within the SOAR folder is also checked. If I check and uncheck these, you notice how all of them are getting checked or unchecked, but my basket is only increasing by 1. So this is just effectively indicating to me that this happens to be a duplicate that is contained within multiple different folders. Now, the same thing is going to go whenever I do my lead-based paints. So if I'm looking for lead-based paint, here we go. Disclosure of lead-based paint sales. Perfect. Check the checkbox for that. And again, just like we saw before, there's a checkbox here in Ada, checkbox for the one that I found, and then another one down here in the Texoma folder. But my basket only increased by 1. Again, you can kind of flutter between those two to make sure that it is actually checking the right checkbox, but effectively just keep track of what this basket is showing you. All right. Now, I also wanted to add in a blank addendum just to make sure that we can cover how that works. So I've got blank addendum, check the checkbox, and now I've got 3 in my basket. I click on add up at the top right corner, and that'll add in all of those forms for me. Now, just as a heads up, we're not going to be filling out the forms quite yet. Remember, we are still in the midst of our wizard. We have one more step that's left. If you guys need to do a preview of the form, cool, that's fine. You guys can click into it, make sure that this is the right one. There's a big X button up at the top here that'll bring us back. Because again, we're going to be talking about the forms at length in a minute here. So we're going to just head to the final step of the wizard by clicking next. And this brings us to our documents. Now, I want to point something out that is just a matter of different vernacular being used. The terms that we're using in Transaction Desk for forms and documents are actually indicating different roles that these are going to play in the transaction itself. In our case, the forms are actually going to be the paperwork effectively that you guys can actually have the system fill out, and then we'll provide you with blanks for you to add extra details. So the forms are going to be interactive. In this case, the documents, even though that's a term that's a little bit more common, just as useful, documents in Transaction Desk are actually just static pieces of information. So what this means is that whenever I'm uploading something to the documents, it's actually going to be asking me to draw that file from my computer. So I can bring that up either from some cloud service that I have, from my computer, from my email, whatever the case may be. You guys are actually getting this information and adding it to Transaction Desk as a brand new document. So again, forms are going to be the interactive elements. Documents are going to be the static information. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this blue space to upload. If I already had the file in a folder that was already open, I could just drag and drop that on here. But in my case, I'm actually going to have to go into my documents, find the form, which was, oh, here we go. This is one. Oh, that's right. I'm not doing the drag and drop right now. There we go. All right. Oh, it's too large. I had an example one. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I moved from one computer to, I finally got a new computer. This computer had been serving me very, very well, but it had some limitations when it came to some things that we needed to just get corrected. You know what, let's do this one. There we go. All right. I'm gonna just drag and drop that on there. Easy peasy. So this actually is just a file plat that we had for a subdivision we needed to add, but in principle, the idea is that if you guys have some kind of PDF of any kind, a Word document, Excel file, some scanned PNG or JPEG file, whatever it happens to be, you guys could typically add that in here. What that means, though, is just that this is going to be something that I can send off to be signed. I can add signature blocks to this. We can add in details about the property. Whatever we need to do, it's just that instead of it automatically knowing where to fill things out, which is going to be, in this case, what the forms are doing, it's going to actually have us manually have to fill that information out. Now, one last thing that I wanted to cover before we actually get all the way finished with our wizard is during the course of the steps of this wizard, there's going to be a save and exit button that follows us for the first few steps. This save and exit button is actually going to take all of the information that we currently have and then save that into the transaction and then exit just the wizard. So that save and exit is effectively just taking us to where the wizard will send us to after it's over. If I do ever need to just jump back into wherever it was that I left off with the wizard, there is a wizard button up here at the top right corner. Now, I wanted to clarify what exactly we've been doing so far, just to make sure that it's clear. One of the biggest points of confusion that we've noticed with people and Transaction Desk is kind of just a misunderstanding of how it's structured. So just as a quick recap, we landed on our agent dashboard when we first got signed in, and I created a transaction, gave it a name, turned it into a residential listing one, and started the process of the wizard. So you can see that that process has actually already been added up to the top of this transactions list, because this is showing me in order what the most recently modified listing or the most recently modified transaction was. So here it is right up at the top. Select that and it opens up the transaction dashboard. So just as a reminder, this is effectively opening up that manila folder. Here's the label up at the top, the status of it, and then all of the details contained within. So here we have the detail overview showing us what the property is, list price, etc. We can see a quick preview of the 3 forms that we've already added on here. We've got our documents, including that filed plat that I included. And then over to the right, we actually see a whole bevy of different options. We've got our wizard. So in case we had to cut and run, there was a showing, something like that. I just got back in the transaction desk, I need to pick up where I left off. I can just click on the transaction from my dashboard and then just go right back into the wizard up at the top here. There's also going to be a button here for the dashboard that brings me back to this page in case I'm accessing some other portion of this and need to jump back to it. The details is where we can actually go back to make any changes to the address, the list price, even the dates themselves. There's a contact section, which allows me to go back and make sure that I have the right spelling, the right email address, the right corporation, etc. All of that can be changed while you guys are actually looking at this. So make sure that you guys have all of this correct before we actually start filling out forms and getting things sent off to be signed. And actually, speaking of which, the next thing that we're going to be doing is filling out those forms. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Forms button over here to the right. After we've gotten all these filled out, we're going to be sending them off to be signed. And then eventually, once they're completed, they come down into this Documents section. The Documents section, in this case, showing us all of the static information, including the signed version of the forms that we're going to be seeing in a bit here. Now, under my Forms section, though, I actually need to start filling these forms out. I want to make sure that my listing agreement includes all the information about my compensation, the sellers, my office information, etc. All of that needs to be filled out. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on the name of it. When you click on the name of the transactions form, it's going to bring you into a preview that shows a whole bunch of blue spaces, which is data that you guys can actually update. So for instance, if I wanted to maybe change my price, I can actually do that from this form. Whenever you guys make a change to a field that actually already exists elsewhere and auto-populate it, if I change what this price is, it's going to change it across all of my forms. So as a for instance, if I wanted to change what the expiration date was of my listing, I can actually click on this little calendar icon, choose a different date, and this is actually going to go back, change it in my details, and then any other form that references the expiration date will also include that corrected date. So it does work back upstream. So you guys don't have to worry about making a change on a form and then having to go back and change it again somewhere else just to make sure that it shows up correctly elsewhere. So also going to point out these little blue blank spaces. These are just indicating to us where we can put some details in. I'm going to say that I want 10% of my, oh, you know what? I want 100% of my, my total sales price of the property. Not really. We'll just stick with 10. That's reasonable for $1 billion property, right? Has to sell the property within 7 days or 47. Sure, why not? And within 1 day. Perfect. I'm going to scroll down towards the bottom here. There's going to be a couple options on here that are either or. The system will recognize when there's contradictory options. So for instance, if you guys end up needing to say is, if I accidentally click on the is not, it's not going to or leave both of those checked. It does allow me only to choose one at a time. There's also going to be some sections here where you guys can actually put in some text and then save that as a clause. And then you can always come back and add a particular clause later. But for the most part, most people just start typing. Perfect. And then finally accepted this day, and I'm just going to choose today's date. And you'll notice that it automatically puts in the date in the format that's going to make the most sense for whatever field it is that you're looking at. So in this case, 13th day of July, 2022. Oh, it looks like it only takes the 2 fields there, or 2 characters. Anyway, now we also have down here towards the bottom our 2 different sellers. And it's worth pointing out as well that they automatically have the owner's address here and both of their email addresses as well. If I wanted to just go ahead and get this particular form signed, there is a signing button up here at the top that does send to Authentisign, but we don't want to go that route quite yet. I've got all the details filled out on this particular form. We can hit this save and exit button to bring us back to the former page, and then I can click on the next form to go ahead and start the process on that one. This one looks like it's already gotten everything that I need in here. Just as a heads up, at the moment, the lead-based paint disclosure is actually allowing for the agent to fill this out. And in order for you to have the client fill it out, you're actually going to have to make some changes to the signing. This is not ideal. We are trying to get them to add in a separate lead-based paint disclosure that's actually going to be more focused on getting the client to fill the information out. So just keep an eye out for that. It's going to be happening in the near future. And I also wanted to point out as well that the easier route to changing to a different form, instead of actually having to click this save and exit, there's a button up here at the top called Transaction Forms that allows us to see all of the transaction forms in just a quick and easy list format, so that by the time you go to the blank addendum, it's not having to load 2 different pages. Oops, click it one more time. There we go. It just goes straight into the preview for that particular blank addendum. Now, the blank addendum is going to be our playground. This is where we're going to add in a whole bunch of extra features right now, and then also during the signing. But on first blush, this actually does seem like a pretty empty, and living up to its name, blank form. The only thing that's actually going to be appearing on there is automatically at least, is going to be our property's address. A little bit further down, we have a section. Notice this whole big blue section down here. As soon as I start typing, it actually clears out all of the lines underneath there, because the expectation is if I'm going to be adding some text onto this blank addendum on the computer, I don't need those lines to tell me where to actually write, you know? So not to worry, it'll clear that all out. In our case, do you like fruit baskets? Yes, no. And then, are you allergic to any fruit? There we go. Now, this may seem a little strange. These are just kind of practical examples that we're going to use. I didn't want to do anything that was too obvious. So we're just going to leave it there. And then down towards the bottom here, these fields that we see that there's supposed to be some signature names in, at the moment, don't actually include anything. That's perfectly normal. What this is actually indicating to us is just that, surprise, surprise, there is no field or there is no role for any of these signatures. It's a blank addendum, meaning that none of this should have any role tied to it. Now I can manually add in the names of the people that I'm going to have signing this. But in my case, I'm actually going to leave those blank, and we're going to circle back around to actually get that done later. Now, once I'm ready to actually get all of these sent off to be signed, I'm going to click on this transaction forms up at the top, hit the checkbox over here to the right, and you'll notice that this fills my basket. Once I have all the forms that I want to send off, I'm going to click that basket, and it's going to present me with a send to Authentisign, copy, download zip, print, a save as PDF, send via email. So if you guys just wanted to send this off to make sure that everything was copacetic before signing, or we can even send it via fax. Now, in my case, I just want to do the send to Authentisign. But even if you guys are not in the preview, if I hit save and exit and come back to my forms page, so without actually being inside a preview of these, or editing any of these, I can check the checkbox to select all, or I can manually select each of them, and that basket will offer me the exact same options. So we're going to go ahead and get started now with the send to a new Authentisign. We're going to start a portion of this process, and then we're actually going to take our break. So when we first get into the signing portion, there's a couple important notes that we need to make. Up at the top left, we've got a zoom. It allows us to zoom in and zoom out. In case you guys can't read something, you can make sure that you zoom it in close enough to be able to do so. To the right of that is going to be the name of this particular signing. Now, I can't stress this enough. The signing in this case is actually going to be named something that's just kind of a amalgamation of the current name of the transaction and then one of the forms that we happen to grab. This just grabbed the name of the first form. This is not necessarily helpful. Sometimes this could be exactly what you guys want it to be, especially if you're just sending off one form. But in my case, I actually have a specific purpose around this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clear out where it says OREC. Here we go. Listing agreement is actually correct. And I'm actually going to change the latter portion to listing agreement signing. Now, the Washingtons don't need to be reminded that they're the ones that are actually signing anything. So I'm going to clear that out as well so that I only have my address and then listing agreement signing. Again, you can keep this as long or as short as you want. It doesn't matter. Again, this is just going to be something that's going to make it easier for you and your client to understand what this is and what the purpose was. All right. Now, you may notice as we actually scroll through this preview that there's going to be some interesting omissions on here. Like currently, I don't see a spot for George to add anything. Don't see a spot for Martha to add anything. There's no check boxes or options in here. And then when we get to the blank addendum, there's definitely nothing on this page. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people end up kind of getting a little bit panicked whenever they get into the property condition disclosure and they don't see that there's any fields for their client to fill out. All of that will change as soon as we start this process right here. This is the effectively the wizard of the signing process. So we start off with our signers, get the docs ready, add in any signature blocks, save those as layouts, and we're done. But the first thing that we need to do, according to this little workflow that they have on the right, is the signers. So I'm going to hit this big blue add participants button, and we're going to say add from transaction. We've got add yourself, add from contacts, but what I want is this is all related to a specific couple. So I just do add from transaction, check the checkbox for the two of them, and hit select. Now I want to just bring your attention one more time to this something over here. We do have a couple different options for how people can interact with this signing. First and foremost is the remote signer. We also have a role called reviewer. This is especially handy for those of you guys who might be working with someone that has a lawyer involved. If you do have somebody that kind of needs to double check the information, make sure that everything is copacetic before they start doing any signing of paperwork, that reviewer option is effectively a binary. This allows us to make sure, all right, look, the information that's on here is correct. I don't need to put my signature on it to say that that's correct, but I do want my client to know that I've looked this over and that everything is in their favor, or at least, not hurting them, whatever the case may be. So that's the reviewer option. We also have one that's just simply a CC. This actually does not get sent off until after the signing has been completed. But what this is going to do is just take whatever the details are of the signing and send it off as a carbon copy. So just, again, a copy for someone else if they need it. This could be handy for those of you guys who are working with co-listing agents, or if you end up wanting to send some information off to the buyer's agent. All that kind of stuff can be done using that CC. Now, I'm not going to be adding myself to this signing because I only need to get my 2 sellers involved. So I'm just going to hit the select button once I've gotten them chosen. So I've set both of them to remote signers by default, select. And as soon as it's added those 2 individuals, it's going to be showing you guys a specific color that's related to that person. Now, this color coordination is going to, again, be directly related to those names. So we should see that the George Washington field is going to be the yellow ones, and it's in the right spot. Same thing goes with our Martha Washington one. It's in the right spot. Scroll down a little bit here. Got George, George, Martha, Martha. Excellent. Martha, Martha, Martha. Why does that sound so familiar, right? And then finally, we get down to our blank addendum. We'll be filling this out last, but again, those fields for the particular individuals, for the particular signers, are all going to be color coordinated. Now, the first thing that I need to do is make sure that whenever they're filling out this lead-based paint disclosure, they're actually going to be able to put in checkboxes or explanations, etc. So I'm going to start off with actually grabbing Martha. She's the one that's actually keeping track of all this information. So Martha, whenever I click on her information, it's actually going to show the basic details about this. This is going to be another opportunity for me to make sure that I've got the correct email address in there. Just a big, huge heads up. This is something that we get phone calls about all the time. If you do end up needing to modify the email address that you're going to be sending it off to, I always tell people that you should be doing that before you even start the signing. So before you've even gotten to this page, make sure that all of the information is up to date. But if you've made it to this page and you do end up wanting to just update something minor, like if it was misspelled or if it's a fully different email address, there's a space here for the email address to be put in, and then make sure that you check the checkbox here that says update contact, because if you don't, it's not going to remember that. And then the next time you start assigning with this exact same person, you're going to have to go manually change that information again anyway, which is not ideal. We also have the final options here. They can put in their signatures. This is where they have all of their custom information. But most importantly, when you guys are looking at these signers, there's going to be, the color coordination indicating who is who, but there's also going to be underneath each of their names a signing pin. This way, whenever you guys have the information sent off, especially to the people that have the same email address, they won't be able to sign as the other person. So what that means is that I would be able to put in a quick and easy PIN code, save that information, and then I'm also going to do the same thing for George. 3, 4. Now, in his case, just a heads up, do not use this as a PIN. I know it seems really obvious not to do stuff like that, but in earnest, this is going to be way too easy for people to guess. Anyway, GW, save. All right. So I've got both of them set up. Let's now click on the Docs tab. Again, this is effectively giving us just a little bit of a workflow. The Docs tab brings us to where we can see each of the different documents that we're going to be sending off. If I needed to add something on there, so for instance, I needed to add in that filed plat to make sure that they have access to it, just click on that Add Document or Form, and you'll be able to find it. Finally, we have our Tools section. This is going to be where we're going to be spending a bulk of our little customizations that we're doing to this particular signing. So I'm actually going to leave us here for a minute. and then we're going to go take our break. So it is currently 10 o'clock. I will see you guys back here at 10:10. I'm going to be putting the video back on the screen and playing the music. As soon as you guys hear the video stop, or hear the music stop and the video's no longer on the screen, we're going to be starting back up again. But make sure that you guys are back. If I don't see you guys interacting, I cannot give you guys CE credit. So make sure you guys are back here in 10 minutes. All right. There we go. All right, we are good to go. Let's go ahead and get started again. So if you guys don't mind, just as a little check-in stop point, if you wouldn't mind hitting that raise hand option, just let me know that you guys are back. Got almost everybody. Excellent. Sherry, I'm hoping we'll be able to get that resolved, but if you wouldn't mind, if you can hear me, hit that raise hand button for me. Everybody else, I got you noted. Thank you so much. But all right, so where we left off, we had initiated the signing, we gave it a name, we added in our signers, added in any extra docs that we were going to be adding, and now we've gotten down to the tools section. Now, the tools section is going to be where we're going to start adding in signature blocks and things that are going to be for specific individuals. Now, I've mentioned a couple times already, but just as a quick heads up, all of the tools are going to be color coded to the signers that we're going to be using. So in this case, again, I wanted to make sure that Martha was going to be the one that actually fills out the seller's disclosure. So here I'm going to switch this over to Martha under my dropdown. And notice all of the colors now are the blue. So there's a couple different ways for us to get signings started. We've got a sign here option. If I just click and drag, that's actually going to be requiring a signature itself. I can click on this. There's a delete button over here. There's a trash can underneath it, or I could just hit delete on the keyboard. In my case, I don't want to do a signature, initials, text line. What I actually want to do is a checkbox. So I'm going to drag this little X checkbox over here. And we'll do another one over here. Now, in this case, this is effectively a required field or a required field. This is going to require her to check those off. In this case, I don't want those to be required though. So I'm going to uncheck the required here. Click on this one, uncheck required. And that way I can actually have her put in either the checkbox on this one, checkbox on that one, either or. I also want to be able to provide her a space for her to add text. So instead of the checkbox, I'm going to use text line. Just click and drag and drop that into the location. Now, if this was a space that I wanted to stay required, I can click on this, and instead of unchecking the required, I can switch this over to required instead. So we're good to go. Now, you may have noticed that instead of doing this checkbox at the top, checkbox at the bottom, this is actually meant to be an either or. So this, we do have known lead-based paint issues, or we do not have any, or don't have any knowledge of it. So instead, I'm going to actually choose this radio choice instead. So when I click and drag to drop this onto the page, it's effectively giving me a either or option by default. It dropped two different spots for me right now. So I can actually move these into position, make sure that they're in the right spot. And this way, whenever they go in to actually do the signing, it's going to be a checkbox here or a checkbox here. So rather than actually requiring them to think about one or the other, and then if they check one and then check the other, it doesn't do anything. It just leaves both of them checked. This one will actually only allow them to do things that make sense, or at least should make sense. Now, we also have the section down here that's going to be the exact same thing. So I'm going to do one more time, click and drag on there. Notice now the drop is actually giving me a 2 next to it. The 2 is going to follow each of the different options. So even if I ended up with a third option for this second set, I would just have to click on it, click the little plus, and there's a third option now that I can use as well. So again, just select the item, plus to add another multiple choice, or delete to get rid of it entirely. So I'm going to get rid of that one. If I get rid of the base 2 that initially got added, it actually deletes both of them so that you don't accidentally have a radio choice that's just unaccompanied. There we go, got that added in there, add in my final text line, and I'm good to go. Now, a little further down, we also have our blank addendum. Now, the blank addendum is where I need to actually do a either or option. So we'll do that radio choice just like we did a moment ago. So we'll do yes or no. There we go. And I also wanted to make sure that George had his as well. So I'm going to switch over to George now. Again, all the colors change. Do my radio choice, yes or no. Perfect. And then I also need to add in a space here that's going to be, are you allergic to any fruits? So this is going to be a drop-down option for me. I'm going to drag that drop-down option onto there. And I'm going to end up saying fruit allergies for the, tooltip. And then I'm also going to define those options. So we'll say apples, comma, bananas, comma. Can you tell I haven't had a fruit basket in a long time? Blackberries. There we go. All right. So what's going to happen is that whenever George gets to this particular space, he's going to see that there's a required field, clicks on it, and then has the option to choose between any of these. Default option, we can just leave as select. I'm going to actually add in a none option as well. Did I fill this out wrong? Oh, with new lines. Man, I always forget which one is the commas, which one's it's not. There we go. This is going to do the right way. Perfect. Now we've got the options. So when he clicks on the drop down, it's going to look like this option right over here. So select apples, bananas, blackberries, or none. Not really giving him too many choices. Maybe he's allergic to both of these or something. Not going to be able to fill that out, but we got that put in there. If I wanted to copy this to make sure that I can have the exact same information for Martha, I'm going to hit duplicate. And we got to drop down here, and I just have to change the assignment once I've selected it. So just to clarify what we're doing, I created one, duplicated it to create another one, and I'm going to just switch this over to Martha. And notice again, changes our colors between the two of them. All right. Now, there's also going to be initial pages and initial choice. I know we kind of skipped around a little bit here going through all of these, but initial pages is going to allow us to drop an initial block that's going to include everybody that I choose on every document that I choose here as well. So I want to say that I'm going to get a small signature block up at the top right of the documents. I'm going to make sure that George and Martha have to sign, and it's going to be for our lead-based paint disclosure and our blank addendum. Now, we also have the option to choose specific pages. So if I wanted to do 1 through 3 of the listing agreement, we can do that as well. All right, now, once we're ready to place these, I'm going to move my page so you guys can see what happens as soon as I click on place initials. It automatically adds in a spot for each of them to sign at the top right of each of these pages. Now I can always move these as well. So like if they ended up in a weird spot or in a bad spot for that particular page, not to worry, you guys can move those around until you guys get them into a position that's going to make sense. Perfect. All right, so we should be all set with that. I'm going to scroll on down here. We're going to now talk about the signature blocks and some of these signer field options. So when I initially drag a signature block over here, what's going to end up happening is that it's going to add in the date. So it just automatically added in this little dingleberry here that I can click and drag to move into a different position. So I'm going to move that date up to right above where the signing block is. I also have the option to add in a couple extra choices. So when I select the actual signer's block itself, I can choose whether or not it's required. That adds and removes the red border there saying required. We can also add in a name block and also even add in a timestamp if we wanted. But the default right now is just the date stamp and that it's required. So for instance, if I close out of that, switch over to Martha, and add in the Martha signature block. When I drop it there initially, it's only going to add in the date. And again, if I select on it, that it's required as well. If I want to, I can actually choose to add in the name block and even a timestamp on there. and I can save those as my default settings. So for instance, if you guys actually did have a lot of forms or documents in this case that may need the name to be added in, you can just choose to add in that name block. Or you can even just use it as a default, and then if it's adding something that you don't need, you can just go in there and delete that one particular portion. So you don't have to worry about deleting the whole block just because of that. Now, if I do end up getting rid of a block that has a name block and a date stamp on there, it's going to get rid of all of it together. Now, these do not all have to be tied together. So for instance, I can drop in that information here. And then if I don't want to actually add in the name block by the system standard, what I can do is actually instead choose to just drag the signer field over. So that's actually what each of these little blue outlines is actually indicating, is just a signer's field. So the auto date, auto time, even the email address is on here. I can go in there, make sure that I have my email address that's going to be added on so that I see each of those on there. Now, the final option is going to be the markup. So everything that's been color coded so far has all been related to the signers and how they interact with this particular signing process. The final step, though, is going to be the markup, and this is going to be entirely for us. So if you guys end up noticing that there's something that's missing on a particular form and you don't want to have to leave this whole process, save it, back out of it, etc., to try and go fix it, what you can do is actually come in here to the markup, and I'm going to say that I want to put a little X right here. Oops. Put an X there. I don't want there to be background, and I can move that into position up here. So I just got my X into the right spot. There we go. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste that down here as well. Move that back into position, and we'll paste another one right here. So that's just one use. We also have the option to just click on the text box and then come up to the top here and say, $1,000. Perfect. Again, move that into position where I want it to be. Choose whether or not I want it to be bold, maybe italic. Choose what font size I want it to be. I want to make it size 12 and add a transparent background. Here we go. So I got all my information added, up to date, good to go. There's also a highlight function. So if there was something that you guys wanted to highlight, you can do so. Once you guys are done with the highlight, you have to click it again to not do highlight. Otherwise, what you can do is just go through and just highlight a whole bunch of stuff all at once, which I do not want to do. So click it to stop it again. Select each of these and get rid of them. I'm going to click on this last one though. I wanted to point out we also have the ability to change what the color is. So if I wanted to highlight this in red, and I can also change the opacity so that it can be a little bit more faint, or if you guys really want to go for it, you guys can go full CIA Black Ops and set that thing to just block out anything you guys don't want to see, which, if I'm not mistaken, you guys probably shouldn't be doing, but it's available if you need it. Anyway, we also have a line function. This is just going to be a straight line. As you guys can see, it just keeps on doing the line until I click on the line button again. And then I have to go through and delete the massive mess that I just made on the screen. But the reason why they end up leaving it that way is for those rare situations you guys might find yourself in where you need to just X out a certain area. So instead of just getting rid of it with, some CIA censorship, you can put those lines on top of it instead. Same thing goes with our freehand tool, but the freehand tool is actually just a full-on, like, I'm just going to follow wherever your cursor is, and then as soon as you let go, I'm done. Still have to click on freehand to get rid of it, and there's also an ellipse, I don't know. Anyway, whatever it is, hardly anybody uses it. All right, so I'm going to leave the rest of that trash on there. So we should be set. That's about it for all of our tools. Now, I wanted to point something out on this particular blank addendum. Let's say that I'm actually going to be using this exact same format often. Like maybe this portion of the blank addendum is always going to get the same text copied and filled out there. So we can actually just take all of the layout options that I did here, head to my layout section, and save this as a layout for future use. This way, when I come back in here later, I can actually have all of these fields with the names and, or not names, the roles, excuse me, the roles that they're connected to all put in here. So if I'm using this again with a different seller, want to find out what the situation is with the fruit basket for the closing ceremony, I can put all that in there, create a layout, and that way I don't have to keep on doing this over and over again. Next time I'll just do apply layouts, choose which layout I'm wanting to use, and that's it. So fairly simple. We don't cover this too much in this class anymore. We used to spend a little bit more time on it, but there's so many new features that we kind of have to skip over it quickly. Finally, we get to our options page, which you guys don't have to use because signing details is just the name that we filled out at the top. Expiration date and reminders are both going to be filled out when I come up to this next option to actually send the signing off. Here's my expiration, here's my reminders, and I'm good to go. This is where I even find the send button. So shouldn't necessarily need the options button. I'm actually just going to head up to the next up at the top here. So if you guys don't want to just, send it to the printer so that they can sign it in person or download it to your computer, you guys have the option to send this off to the actual email addresses. I'm going to set my expiration date to something a little bit closer. We'll just do Friday. I got to sign by Friday, and I want to make sure that they're going to get a reminder every day at 7 a.m. Perfect. There's also a customized invites option, which allows you guys to give a little bit more content to the actual invitation. In my case, I'm actually going to add in a please sign immediately. There we go. And I'm going to save that. Now, one heads up in case you guys do end up in a situation where you do need to actually have people sign in a specific order. When you guys are on that signers page, there's a set signing order. I actually should have mentioned this when we were looking at this earlier, but I apologize. In this case, Martha is actually the one that wants to do all of the review of the documents. George just going to put his John Hancock on it. But so in this case, set signing order. I'm going to set it so that Martha is actually first. I can click and drag to move her into the proper position so that when this gets sent off, Martha actually will sign it. Then after she's finished her signing, George will receive the invitation. So in this case, since I switch these around, I'm going to go to next, customize my invites, and we're going to switch this so that she's the one that receives this please sign immediately. I'm going to say, George cannot sign until after you do. Perfect. Save. All right. Now we're all set. I'm going to hit the send button. This is going to pass that information into their inbox. And lucky for you guys, I'm going to pull up my email here. And I'll show you guys what it looks like from the other people's perspective. So I want to mention just one more thing while we're actually looking at this from the agent's perspective. Where we are at currently is I've gone to my forms, I've checked the checkboxes, initiated the signing, and then I started that process. It's now sent me over into this signings section now, where we can see that I've got the name of the signing. This is part of the reason why I try to reinforce with everyone why you guys should name the things something that's going to make sense. Because when it comes down to it, this is actually going to be what we need to see whenever we're trying to get back into it. We want to make sure that we know what the purpose was of this particular signing. Anyway, over here, got my email pulled up. So we've got Martha. Martha was the first person to actually receive the email. This is indicating to us the please sign immediately customization that I made, and then also the George cannot sign until after you do. Now, part of the reason I wanted to actually provide you guys with this, the subject is going to be way more important to do customization to, because, okay. they wanted to load a new ad, and that's why. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I hate Yahoo. This is why it's my throwaway email. But part of the reason I wanted to show this to you guys was we got please sign immediately. This is obviously going to be prominent. The customization of the additional message, notice this is actually fairly small. This isn't taking up a lot of space. This might not actually be what you guys want. But if I click on this start signing option, it'll immediately send me into the signing. Now, the signing pin is the first thing that she needs to actually fill out. So let me go ahead and put in her signing pin. Again, I provided this to her, hopefully some way that only she will have it. This sounds really distrusting, but I know that on my side, even with my wife, who I love and trust very much, we've accidentally signed as each other on a couple things. Thankfully, nothing legally important, just, getting stuff out of the way. But this isn't a, family birthday card or something like that. We want to make sure that everybody gets their PIN in a way that's going to be above board. You guys don't want to end up having any banks or somebody that's telling us that they don't accept transaction desk because you can send things to the same email address. So make sure that you guys have sent that PIN in a way that only the individual that's meant to see it can see it. Give them a phone call, send it to them by a text or like an encrypted email, whatever level of security you guys want to provide, just make sure that it stays above board. The reason why I want to give that little heads up, that little warning, is because before 2020, before everybody had all of the, remote work and digital signings and everything was kind of more commonplace, there was in fact actually a few banks, one lender specifically I know of in Bartlesville, that actually would not accept transaction desk signings because of the fact that you could send it to the same email address. So if you do end up in a situation where the couple that you're working with happens to use the same email address, make sure that you guys are sending the information to them in a way that's going to be only them that receives it. Anyway, that's my spiel. I'm going to hit OK. Thanks. And it gives us our participant acknowledgement. I accept. And right out the gate, they get to see all of the forms, all the documents, anything and everything that you guys had sent to them. Now, they can do their review before they even get started, but as soon as they actually want to start, this progress bar is going to start filling up. They can either start on the very first button, or they can click this start option, which will actually send them to the right spot. As soon as they click on these fields, it's going to start filling them in. Now, in my case, I happen to be somebody that's already interacted with the transaction desk system, not in earnest, but through this particular process. So if you notice that, they just get to click through this process without any additional steps beforehand, it's because they've already completed the part where they have to choose their signature. If they have never been into the transaction desk system, this is actually the first step that they'll see. So they hit that start button. First thing it's going to ask is what signature they would like to use. They can choose either a specific style. I'm going to use this Christie one. They can draw it themselves if they have really good computer skills, and clearly do not. Being an art major did not help me do signatures. Anyway, all right. Meanwhile, if it's a button, I can hit it really quick and easy. Anyway, brains are weird. I'm going to go ahead and click another box. Done. Do I have any fruit allergies? None. And I'm all set. Now, this is usually going to be the part where people get hung up. We've noticed a lot of people will end up having like a spare field somewhere or a drop down or a checkbox or something that they did not hit. This progress bar up at the top is one of the most important things for people to keep track of. Please, 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 if you guys end up in a situation where you have somebody that's not being able to complete their signing, this is where you need to direct their attention. Find out if they can see what's up here. And then there's going to be a next and back option. So for instance, if I wanted to just completely restart this entire process, I can do so. Finish, complete signing. There's also a reject. But if you guys end up in that situation where they have not finished this process, there's going to be a next and back button where this finish option is instead. They can find out where it is on the page that they're missing. But again, after they're done, finish, complete signing, easy peasy. They can print or download the information that they just signed, but this signing ID is actually going to be the exact same information for both Martha and George. This signing ID is actually directly related to this signing process. So where is the, yeah, reload this real quick. Ba-ba-ba. So that signing ID is directly related to this particular signing process. So when they come back in and want to, send this to the bank or something like that, they can take that document and it'll have effectively a receipt number showing them this guy right here, this number. All right. Now, George just received his invitation because Martha finished. So I'm going to move to that email. I notice this is going to just include the generic text. So your signature is requested. It shows the address because that's what I chose for it to show. And then it shows the name of the signing. Again, all of this is going to be the name of the signing. It's just going to make it a little bit easier for your client if you include some context and then what the purpose is. Context and purpose. Anyway, or contact and purpose when it comes to the name of the transaction. But regardless, George is ready to get started on the signing. He hits start signing. Again, he's going to have an option to put in his PIN because they have the same email address. Thanks, accept. Now, let's say that George does not have a signing that he's created for himself in Transaction Desk. The first thing that he's going to see is going to look like this. He's going to have to choose what font he wants to use, draw his email or draw his signature, or upload the JPEG, PNG, or bitmap of his signature, which seems a little insecure to me, but that's okay. Not insecure, emotionally insecure that I wouldn't want to have a JPEG of my own signature on something, just in case somebody wants to steal that. But he's ready to go, set signature. And again, back and next are going to be the most important things for your clients to keep track of. As soon as he hit next, brings him down to the spot. If he starts clicking or even hitting the space bar, I'm going to move my cursor off of this. If I hit the space bar, that also moves you between these really quick and easy. So the only thing that the space bar can't do is make choices for these. So hit none. Perfect. And last spot, good to go. All right. So complete signing once more. He gets the exact same ID code. He gets the option to print and download if he needs to. And that's the end of the process. Now, both Martha and George are going to end up receiving emails indicating that they can download all of the information that's related to what they just came up with. So all the signing process can be whittled down into an email at the end that provides them with each individual document and form that they signed, as well as one that includes all of them together, and then also the signature certificates. Now, the certificates in this case are actually meant for the purposes of lenders, banks, lawyers, whatever. They need to know that this is a legally binding contract. And the easiest way for them to see that is the certificates. So George will receive one, Martha will receive one. And again, they can download the individual signed documents as well as those signed documents certificates. So lots of different options for them. They're good to go. All right, now if I come back to Transaction Desk, I can see that it's automatically updated my thing showing that both Martha and George have completed their signing. If ever you guys end up in a situation where the client says, oh, it doesn't look like it came to the right email address, let me show you guys how to get into that. So you've received that note from the client. I'm going to go into this transaction, open up my transaction, head over to my signings, click on the signing name. And when this is still in the process, so before the actual completion, there's going to be a little edit button over here to the right that allows us to change the email address that it's going to be going to. Up here at the top, there's also going to be a reset, which allows me to go back to the beginning of the process, make sure that everything is filled out correctly. So literally back to where we can do the signature blocks, etc. There's also a resend option to allow us to resend to any of the individuals who have not completed their signing yet. And then finally, we've also got a cancel option as well. Now, since we're already in the process and we've already actually completed the signing, those options have changed. Now we see the view signed PDF, view signed certificates, and then copy this information to the cloud or delete or duplicate. Anyway, now the signing process in this case is done. So where do we find the actual signed versions of these? It's actually going to add all of those versions over to the documents over here to the right. So after the signing has been completed, you go to Documents, and you're going to see that there's a folder that's been named the signing's name. So when you guys get into the documents, each signing that you guys have completed will have its own independent folder. This way you guys can just jump directly into that folder, find all of the certificates that are related to the signing, as well as all these signed versions of the forms. Now that receipt number is actually going to be printed up at the very top left. You guys can choose where to put that if you need to. I usually just recommend leaving it at the top left since most forms leave that space available anyway. But that AuthentiSign ID is going to be what the lender would need to use if there is some conflict about whether or not this is legally binding or acceptable, etc. AuthentiSign keeps all of that information. Keeps all that information connected to that AuthentiSign ID. Again, it's effectively just the receipt number. If we wanted to send any of this off, there's some check boxes over here to the right, similar to how we started the process of actually doing the signing. And that fills up a basket up here at the top. And again, when you click on the baskets, no matter which basket you're choosing, it's going to show you a whole bunch of different options. Just as a heads up, for those of you guys who are agents, there is a submit for review button, both on the documents that have been signed, as well as any that have not. But if you guys want to send a whole bunch of these off to be signed at the same time, you guys can check those, go up to the basket, and request review. This will send a notification over to the broker or any of the admins in the office that there is a new document that needs to be reviewed. There's some move options. So if you guys wanted to take this out of that folder, you guys can move it back. There's also a merge option. Puts all those together into one document. Copy, send to the cloud, download a zip of it, start a new signing with this documentation. So this could especially be handy for those of you guys who got a buyer as well. Get that into the basket, send it off to AuthentiSign, and go ahead and have your buyers sign it. Just don't forget to actually create those contacts for the buyers over here on the right. Also, I wanted to point out something else. When you guys are looking at these, there's going to be a menu button over to the right. This menu button allows you guys to see the product or see the form, print it off, download it, delete it. But there's also a slice/markup option I wanted to cover real quick. When you click on slice/markup, it offers you either to slice, which means that I can actually take parts and pieces of this document and separate them out into different parts and pieces, or we can do the markup option. Now, the markup in this case is actually indicating to us that this is actually something that we can go back, we can add in all of our sensors or the asterisks or anything else. So when I go into markup, just as a heads up, we can add in any blockouts, we can add in any highlights, and effectively get this document prepped the same way that we would do if this was a form. But I don't want any of that. No, don't just save those changes. Instead, I want to actually do the split or slice, excuse me. So when I go to the slice, it's going to present me with a preview of each and every page. I can click that zoom button to see what that particular page contains. But if I click on the actual page itself, notice this little blue border is indicating it's been selected. I can select all those pages, go to the save option, and save this as a completely new document. So notice save as, selected pages, and I can say listing agreement 1 through 3. I'll just keep it simple. I'm not going to try and overthink this, right? Hit save. And now when I go back, do I want to save the changes? No. When I go back, there's now a separate document Notice this one does not have that certified and digitally signed padlock on it. This is just a separate document. When I click on this, I can now see that I've got all the information on there up to the 3rd page. This can also be sent off if you guys have some agent or broker on the other side that's needing to get some clarification on something, but you don't want to give away all of the information. You can just check that checkbox, send it off via fax, email, whatever you guys need to do. In my case, I'm actually going to select it, go to the basket, and let's just delete that because we don't really need it. Perfect. All right. Now, one other thing that we should point out, since there may be a couple of you that are either following along on the recording or following along right now, there is a delete transaction button up here at the top. So if you find yourself in a situation where you no longer want to be using this particular transaction, if it was a fake one or everything fell through and you guys didn't even get the process started, didn't even get anything signed, you can hit that delete transaction. There is also an archive option that's going to be better if you guys started something, even got anything signed at all. I would recommend using that archive instead of the delete, because you never know. Some of that paperwork might be necessary later. Who knows? And actually, speaking of document retention, the transaction desk system will keep almost every single document and form that you guys have for at minimum 10 years. As far as I'm aware, they don't get rid of things, but they have to keep things for up to 10 years at a minimum. So you guys should still have access to everything even after that decade. It's just, that's the legal requirement for that. All right, now we're going to head back to our forms section. There's going to be 2 extra forms that I wanted to cover that are going to be a little bit unrelated to the basic process that we went through so far. So I did want to just do a little quiet recap real quick. We created a transaction. Once we were in that transaction, we completed the wizard. Once we had filled out our forms, we initiated the signing. We reviewed those documents there. But there is also some forms that are going to be a little bit more specific to the listing process that you guys will need to be a little bit more aware of. I'm going to click on the add button. We're going to add in an MLS specific form that's the MLS property data form. Now I'm going to use the most complicated one, which is the residential version. So I'm going to check the checkbox for it. Click add. That's gotten added on here. And actually, I'm also going to do the property condition disclosure as well. We're going to add that after, though. Now, the property data form is actually the official property data form for the MLS. This actually used to be called the matrix data form. Now we just simplified it to property data form just to keep it a little bit less specific to the system that we're using right now. But what this is allowing us to do is actually go through and digitally fill out all of the details about the property. So rather than having to print this off and manually have to fill everything out, you guys can actually go through the process of getting this all filled out digitally. And if you guys are these mobile agents that are doing things on the phones, this can all be filled out on your phone. I might suggest using a tablet of some kind. Like filling this out on the iPad is extremely easy, strongly recommended. But once you guys have actually filled the information out on here, if you have add edit permission, which actually just out of curiosity, how many of you guys know you have add edit permission already? Just hit that raise hand button. None so far. And that's okay. Just in case you guys get that in the future, there should be a button up at the top that says upload listing. You can still fill all of this information out in advance anyway, but there is actually a button up here at the top. So if you guys do get add edit, you can fill all the details in on here and then go up to the top and do upload listing, and it will save an incomplete listing in Matrix for you with the details that you guys have filled out digitally. And I left the city off. Let me go ahead and add that on here. Let's do Indianola. Sure, there we go. Upload listing. And it'll give me an incomplete listing number. So this way, when I get back into Matrix, I can actually just start off with the information that I already have available in that incomplete listing. So 876 South George Street, Indianola. I go into my residential thing, and I've already got my basic details put in. My legal description is already put in. We've got the list price already put in. The list date, expiration date, for some reason didn't import, but we can always add that on there. But saves a lot of time and trouble. Very, very strongly recommended if you guys haven't tried that out yet. But either way, that's going to be our property data form. I'm going to exit out of that. We also want to talk about the property condition disclosure. This is a very important form, and it confuses a lot of people. So when you guys get into the forms, do property condition. Go. Oops. All right. So the property condition disclosure comes in two different flavors. I'm going to scroll down here until I see the residential forms and contracts. All right. There's an agent interactive version and a client interactive version. I'm going to add both of these just so you guys can see the difference between the two. When I'm looking at the agent interactive version, which arguably shouldn't exist, the agent interactive version is going to show all the checkboxes for me to check. It does have some, either or options built into this, so you can't necessarily, accidentally put in something contradictory. But this is going to allow you to fill this out. Now, for those of you guys who are keeping track of what I'm saying, this probably is not something that you guys should have access to. But oftentimes what will end up happening is that agents will come in, see what the form looks like and say, oh, this is exactly what I want the client to fill out. Agent interactive means that you're the one that's filling this out. Now, the reason why people oftentimes get confused is because if I open up the client interactive version, it shows nothing. It just appears to be blank. But just as a reminder, the only fields that you guys should be seeing when you guys are looking at a form are the fields that you as the agent need to fill out. If you don't see any checkboxes or open spaces or text boxes or anything like that, that means that you're not going to be the one filling it out. So cut and dry, if you don't see a blue space for you to fill out, that's because the client is going to have to fill it out. So just to show you guys the last kind of confusion related to this, if I check the checkbox for this and end up doing the basket, send it off to be signed, the next portion of confusion that people experience with this form is that when they land here, again, it's still blank. As soon as I add in a participant, though, especially if they're marked as the seller, suddenly we have a whole bunch of blank spaces for us to fill out. So when George ends up receiving this, he gets to choose between all of these options, puts a signature on there, everything else. Also, it's worth pointing out, if you guys do end up wanting to actually change the order so that it's actually Martha that fills this out instead of George, changing their order with the signing order does nothing. What would actually need to happen is that you guys are going to have to move from signing. There we go. Remove George from the signing. And then when you guys add the participant, add one at a time to make sure that whoever the first person is that you add is going to be the one that actually completes the signing. So even though her color just changed, Martha is the yellow, which is the first color. And then as soon as I add in George, George will not have to fill this out. George is only going to end up having to fill out the signature blocks down at the very bottom. Easy peasy. All right. Now I've initiated a signing. If I need to come back to this later, I can hit the save button. There's also a back option that just brings me back, and I can even choose a don't save so that I don't have to worry about, seeing another signing that I've initiated. All right. Okay. The last little bit here, I'm going to spend talking about our transaction templates. Now, I mentioned transaction templates at the very beginning of class because when you guys initiate a transaction, if you have a template already, you'll see a spot here for this. You choose from the dropdown, and there's a bunch of different ones that I've already created or people in my office have. But in my case, I actually want to create my own. especially for those of you guys who don't see this drop down at all. That means that you don't even have access to any, even ones that your office has created for you. So down at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, this is going to be the menu that's going to be specific to Transaction Desk as a whole. Whereas if you guys remember, all the options that we see over here on the right-hand side of the screen when we're looking at a transaction are related to just this transaction. So the signings are just for this transaction. The documents are just for this transaction. But if I go over to the left-hand side, my dashboard is going to be related to all of my transactions. My home button, the transactions button, shows me all of the different transactions, photos. We can even change how they're sorted, filtered, et cetera, et cetera. We've got a signings. This is going to show all of the signings, no matter which transaction I happen to be looking at, forms, documents, contacts, all of that. Everything over here on the left-hand side is just system-wide navigation. But at the bottom of that, we've got a help option and a settings option. Under settings, we've got preferences and how you guys can connect this to, if you guys have an iPhone or an iPad, you guys can do the linked application. The application is a little bit out of date. Opening up the website is going to be just as useful to you, if I'm being honest. But down here, we're going to have the transaction templates. This is where we can go through and actually create those templates if we want to make one for ourselves. Now, the templates actually serve a very specific purpose. When you guys are actually creating a transaction template, you can just give it a name, add in what the type is that you want it to be. So I'll do residential listing packet, auction only 3. There we go. Save. Now I've given this a name, and now it's showing up with checklists, and contacts, documents and folders, forms, teams, and sharing. What this is actually allowing me to do is gather that information in advance of actually creating the temp or the transaction, so that when I start the transaction, it'll already have these checklists. It'll already have these contacts, these documents, these forms, or even the sharing and teams that you guys want. So if you guys are on a code listing team or a team in your office or something like that, you guys can set those people up. But I want to focus in on the forms because this is going to be something that everyone should be trying to use. When you guys go into the forms, it's going to be empty at first. So I have to do the add forms option. I'm going to go ahead and grab all the ones that we were just talking about. So exclusive right to sell. Right to sell, perfect. Add in my lead-based paint. So even if I don't end up needing my lead-based paint disclosure, I can always remove it from the transaction. It doesn't have to be relevant for every single listing. Blank addendum, property data form. Since this is going to be a residential listing, I'm going to use the residential option and also the property condition disclosure. There we go. Client interactive version. Perfect. So I have my basket filled up. I can always double check my basket by clicking on it, make sure I have all of the right items in there. Click add. So now when I create a brand new transaction using this specific template, not only is it going to use all of these forms on that transaction, but if I come in here and actually choose to, because again, this one in this case is going to be for auctions. If I come in here and decide, wait a second, I need to block this portion out. Again, don't take this seriously. I don't know what this particular paragraph says, but if I needed to block that out, I can come up to the top here, do my markups, and actually block all of that text out. Now on the transactions template, this block out is going to appear every time I use that template. So you can create highly specified or highly specific transaction templates if you would like, that'll end up effectively just making sure that by the time you actually start the transaction and use that template, you barely have to do any other work besides just adding in the details about the contacts, the property in question. Easy peasy. There's other options on this markup as well. So if you guys want to explore those, just grab a form, open it up, and you guys can actually go through and do all the highlighting, and add some text to it, whatever you guys need. Anyway, all right, so that's it. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and exit. And just to illustrate how this actually functions, this will be the last thing we do. I'm going to go to create transaction, find this auction only, auction test. There we go. Adds me as a listing agent because I chose a residential listing as my type already. And then when I get to contacts, I'm already added, and forms, it's already added all of those forms for me. So again, the transaction templates, in my opinion, are one of the most useful things that you guys have access to in here. Make sure that you guys do that before you pretty much do anything else. I think that's the most valuable thing on this. Anyway, that's it for our class today. Just wanted to say thank you again for joining us. Just as a kind of side note, we ended up running some statistics on our training that we've provided. The 2 years that I was training before the pandemic, I ended up training somewhere around 1,500 people amongst dozens and dozens of classes, doing outreach and everything. Since we introduced the webinars, we have trained 3,500 people over the course of 2 years. So we've more than doubled the amount of people that we've been able to train, and that's individuals. That's not just participants. That's how many individuals we've actually taught. So thank you guys so much for participating in our training. We want to make sure that all of this is as valuable to you guys as it can be. So if you have any suggestions, or if you guys have something that you guys would like for us to do training on, or come out to your office to do training, we are training a new outreach trainer right now. She's going to be up and ready to teach probably within the next couple months. So we're going to get back on that office outreach program. We're also going to be going out to do training outside of the Tulsa area as well. So if you guys have need, let us know. An unspoken need is an unmet need. So just please help us out with helping you guys get the most out of your membership with us. We appreciate you. Stay safe. Oh, and also I'm going to send the recording for this a little bit later. I'm also going to be including with that recording email some additional tutorials that you guys can use, and then also a link to our knowledge base system. But all right, thank you guys so much. Oh, and Sherry, I'm not sure why it kicked you out. I noticed there was somebody else that was getting disconnected pretty frequently as well. As long as you guys didn't miss more than like 5 minutes of the class, I don't care. When we send that information off to OREC for the attendance log, as long as you guys were at least staying in and obviously participating whenever we ask for you guys to raise the hand, you should be able to get the CE credit. But again, since we'll be sending the recording afterwards, if there was something that you missed, you guys can always go back and kind of review it if need be. Oh, that's okay, Desiree. If I find out that there's an issue, or if you were like too late or something, I'll reach out to you. But we actually started the course content at 9:06 technically. So as long as you were there then, you should be fine. But yeah, I'll know for sure once we get there. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, again, thank you guys so much for joining us. Stay safe, stay out of the heat, keep away from people who are coughing, and we'll see you in future training.